Every time I die, I am reborn into the next life with all my memories intact. In my first life, I was reborn as an ant. But before I could even get started, with my grand plans to shake the trees, I was devoured by a lava beetle. But after being eaten, I was reborn once again with my memories. Starting from that very first ant, I lived as mayflies, moths, butterflies, and then crickets. In the next life, I tried again, although death would come quickly. I was able to be reborn continuously without end. But gradually, I realized that the creatures I was reborn as were mostly weak and fragile beings, although I tried to keep being reborn, hoping to become something powerful and strong. Even if I could not become a human, the most intelligent of all creatures. Something like a fierce tiger or a mighty lion, the king of beasts, would have been great too. But things did not go as I had hoped. As I kept trying, I discovered that if I deliberately sought death or died prematurely, then my next life would be as a similar type of creature, or sometimes something even weaker than before. So I stopped throwing my life away on purpose. Instead, I changed my perspective and started to observe the world around me. Choosing to enjoy my life as an arthropod, I witnessed the magnificent beauty of the natural world and saw the wonders of the microscopic realm. As life after life passed by in succession, my state of mind gradually became much calmer. Then I came to realize that whenever I gained some new understanding during a lifetime, after that life ended, I would be reborn as a more powerful creature than before. So I began to accept each brief life with a greater sense of peace, life after life. I lost count of how many I had lived through. Perhaps not that much time had actually passed. After all, the lifespans of insects are very short. Then one day, I was reborn as a fish, from insect to fish, from an invertebrate to a vertebrate. This was truly a huge leap forward. Of course, as a fish, I still could not choose how to live my life, whether in the ocean, or in a river, or in a stream. I went through 90 lives in a row, and every single one of them ended in an early death, either eaten by a larger fish, or caught by a fisherman, or shattered to pieces after being swept up in a storm. No matter how careful I tried to be, I still could not escape the accidents that came with life. Sometimes the natural world is simply that unreasonable, and this life seemed to be no different. Am I a carp? I swished my tail fin and swam another lap around the river, although my body was still quite small. Having lived through 9 lives already, I had long since grown accustomed to life as a fish, so I felt no discomfort at all. Observing the water around me, it flowed calmly. Lotus flowers were in bloom, and the water had a decent depth to it. So I was likely in a small river. The water was so clear I could see the bottom. Apart from the lotuses, there were also many kinds of algae, and they all looked very fresh, which made me feel quite happy. It seemed that in this life, my luck was already much better than in my previous lives. And besides, a carp is much better looking than an eel, or a codfish, so I was actually quite satisfied with my appearance. I just hoped that this life could pass by peacefully. I thought to myself, by now I no longer had the fantasies and struggles from my early days. I only wanted to live out my life as a fish in a calm and steady manner. But just then, a carp next to me suddenly started thrashing violently. I turned to look, and saw that the carp seemed to be caught by something, and was yanked straight upward. Soon after, a loud splash echoed across the water. My fears were coming true. I sighed to myself for a moment, and immediately understood what was happening. I looked around, and sure enough, in my circular fisheye vision, I spotted several tiny fishing hooks. Those were definitely fish hooks. It seemed that the river I was in happened to pass through an area with people. Where there are people, there are fishermen. And where there are fishermen, there are of course fish hooks. Luckily, there were no fishing nets. With just these fish hooks and the pitiful bait on them, I had no desire whatsoever to take a bite, unless I was tired of living. In my previous 9 lives, I had been caught by people, usually stabbed to death by a fishing spear in a small stream. But this time in the river, I did not have that worry. Looking closely at those fish hooks, most of them were exactly the same as the fish hooks I remembered from my human days. But among the hooks, there was one that gleamed with a cold, pale light. A straight hook, like a silver needle, very eye-catching. The straight hook was smooth, and there was no bait on it. Jiang Taigong fishing. I could not help but think to myself sarcastically, surely no one actually believes in that legend of Jiang Taigong fishing. Never mind whether I was even in my original world, or whether the story of Jiang Zia existed here. But would any fish really be stupid enough to bite a straight hook? Anyway, remembering how miserable that fish looked just now, I decided to swim down into deeper water, to avoid the possibility of a fishing net coming for me. In one of my past lives, I had been caught by fishermen, and turned into salted pickled fish. The taste of that. I never wanted to experience that so-called raw pickled flavor ever again. I decided to escape. But just as I was about to, a sudden wave of unease surged up from the bottom of my heart. Even though the river water was warm, my body felt as if it had been instantly frozen solid. For some reason, I felt an intense sense of danger. I started thrashing my tail violently, but before I could even move, I realized that in that very instant, my body seemed to be firmly gripped by something, and I could not move at all. What is happening? I was stunned. I tried again a couple of times, but I still could not break free. My body was being forced to swim in one direction. Looking closely, it was actually toward that silver needle, and then I watched helplessly as I bit down on that silver needle. Well, I have officially become a stupid fish. A stream of water rushed straight upward, then accompanied by splashing water. A large amount of fresh air rushed into my gills. Before I knew it, I was already up in the air. My gills were opening and closing, trying to breathe the air. Although I could still filter oxygen for a moment, it would only get harder and harder, so I have been caught after all. I thought bitterly, but since I can just be reborn anyway, I am not afraid of dying. More than the fact that I had been caught, I was actually more curious about why I suddenly lost control and bit that silver needle. As if I had been manipulated by something, I shifted my gaze and looked carefully at the person who had pulled me up. It was an old man. The old man was round and plump. Of course, that was because as a carp, the world in my eyes was naturally round. But if seen from a human's perspective, The old man wore a gray robe and had an ethereal, immortal-like appearance. Beside the old man were several other round and plump people. There were 4 people in total. The oldest was a young man of about 18 or 19, and the youngest was a little girl of about 8 or 9. Their robes looked similar to Taoist robes, but not exactly the same. This was my first time directly observing humans, although I had been caught before. It was either when I was near death, or the fisherman had dressed very ordinarily, without anything special. But seeing this now, I had indeed traveled back to ancient times. This was a very important piece of information. As a reborn soul, maybe there was a chance I could survive all the way to the modern era. On the other side, Master, you are amazing. A clear voice spoke. It was the little girl. The fish actually took the bait, and such a beautiful koi fish too. Big senior brother, it looks like you lost the bet. A boy of about 11 or 12 clapped his hands and said, Yeah, you lost, big senior brother. Another honest-looking young man shouted excitedly, fishing with a straight hook. In all my years, this is the first time I have seen a fish actually take the bait on its own. The oldest of the 4 young men also admitted defeat upon hearing this, and could not help but exclaim, as expected of our master. The master saying that only the willing take the bait is truly extraordinary. It seems that just as our master said, only by following the natural order can one act freely and at ease. Hearing this, the old man stroked his beard and explained, All of you should understand the so-called way of the Tao. One must never go against it by force. Otherwise, there will surely be consequences. Only by following your heart and following heaven, by going along with nature, will the fish willingly take the bait? Master, your words are very wise. We will humbly accept your teachings. All the disciples looked respectful and attentive, but in my heart I was completely speechless. Old man, I have never seen such a shameless person in all my lives. And just then, suddenly my body felt light and free. The force that had been holding me captive just faded away. Then the hook was pulled in. The little girl next to him quickly came over and grabbed me, probably to put me in the fish basket. Maybe I would be going into the pot soon. And just then, a sudden impulse surged through my heart. As the little girl grabbed me, I thrashed my body violently. With a burst of strength and the help of my slimy scales, I actually broke free from her grip and leaped into the air. Gasps of surprise rang out. Watch out, he is trying to jump back into the river. Do not let him escape. Such a beautiful koi fish. Do not let him hit the rocks either. The disciples scrambled in a panic, grouping together, some waving their fishing hooks, some holding out baskets, trying to catch me. The old man simply stroked his beard and smiled, his expression unchanged, as if everything was under his control. But to everyone's surprise, I did not jump toward the river. I had never intended to save myself. Instead, that koi fish in midair curved its tail, suddenly flipped itself over, then swung its tail with force. Smack! A loud sound rang out. Everyone was stunned, and their movements came to a halt. The old man was also taken aback, because my fishtail had actually slapped right across the old man's face, making a crisp sound. For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. My heart was filled with immense satisfaction. Escape was impossible. Having witnessed the old man's strange power, I already knew that my life would probably end here. Even if I jumped back into the river, the old man could probably just use his willing bait trick again. So instead of that, I would do the opposite. Like a moth to a flame. Like an ant trying to shake a tree. For most people, something like this only happens once in a lifetime. But for me, it had become a regular occurrence. Since I was going to die anyway, at least I could go out with a bang. Feeling everyone's shock, I was completely satisfied. I did not struggle anymore. Just lay on the ground with my eyes rolled back, quietly waiting for my next rebirth. Only the willing take the bait. Nonsense, I was willing. You got that right. The disciples were dumbfounded. What just happened? The master was actually slapped by a carp. They stared at the old man speechless for a moment, as if they had never imagined such a scene could occur. The little girl, however, saw this, and could not help but burst into laughter. Master, I did not mean to do it. He is all slimy, the little girl's laugh helped ease the tense atmosphere, but the disciples were still a bit shocked as they looked at the old man. After all, even if the little girl had accidentally dropped the fish, for someone like their master, it was still far too strange. Besides, that fish in the air seemed to have twisted around on its own, rather than it being an accident caused by the little girl. This made no sense at all. As for the old man, after the little girl laughed, the brief tension from before had dissipated. The old man was not angry. Instead, a certain gleam appeared in his eyes. Given his level of cultivation, even though he had been relaxed, he could still clearly see the expression on that fish. Could it be the old man gently stroked his beard? After a moment, he slowly explained, All of you saw Janger grab him just now, going against his will. That is why he leaped up. And this is the principle of going with the flow, and not forcing things against their nature. Upon hearing this, the disciples seemed to have an epiphany. So that is it. The master was teaching them not to force things, and given the master's status, he had actually watched that koi fish slap him, without dodging or avoiding it, all to teach them through both words and actions. The disciples were all deeply moved. Master, we have learned our lesson. Hearing this, I froze completely. Using the little girl as a cover for his own embarrassment, I never imagined there could be someone so shameless in this world. It seems one tail slap was not enough. I flapped around a couple of times, wanting to give the old man another hit, but this time, it was probably not going to happen. And as time passed, my gills were opening and closing faster and faster. The moisture on my gills was gradually drying up, and the feeling of suffocation was naturally getting stronger. Oh well, I stopped trying. Besides, it was actually kind of fun. The old man and his disciples got to witness such a heartwarming scene. I guess they have no regrets in life now. See you all in the next life. I thought to myself, my eyes were starting to close, but they only rolled around a bit. And just then, a round old face suddenly appeared in my field of vision. It was that old man. My eyes shot wide open. The old man looked at me, his eyes narrowing, and the corners of his mouth curling up. How do you all think we should cook this fish? Hearing that old voice, my spirit completely broke. If you want to eat me, just get it over with. Why do you have to stare at me and talk about it? Killing me is bad enough, but you have to torment me too. This is pure banditry, even worse than bandits. I thrashed my body again, still trying to land another hit on the old man, but there was simply no way to get any leverage, and that feeling of being trapped had returned. Among the disciples, a boy of about 11 or 12 stepped forward. "Master, I want to eat it grilled." The oldest young man beside him also smiled. Master once said that governing a large state is like cooking a small fish, so naturally it should be slowly simmered in a pot. Seeing this, the old man asked the little girl, "Hanger, what do you think?" I had no strength left to complain. Can someone just put me out of my misery already? It seemed my only hope was that little junior sister. Little girls are usually kind-hearted, right? Fishy fish are so cute. How about eating it raw as sashimi, slice by slice? No, I am not even seafood. I screamed in my heart and thrashed a few more times. Everyone started laughing. I stared wide-eyed at the round faces in front of me. These people were laughing so sinisterly. The old man gently picked me up and stuffed me into the fish basket. Great. There were already several other carps in there. One of them seemed to be the one that young man had just caught, and I imagined the other disciples' baskets were also full of grass carp and carps and such. My brothers. Strangely enough, although there was no water in this basket, I felt my breathing become much easier, and I was no longer suffocating. I vaguely heard the people outside talking about something, but right now I had no interest in the outside world at all. Just put me out of my misery already. After discussing outside what to eat for dinner, the disciples turned to look at the old man again. "Master, this koi fish seems to understand what we are saying." Actually, from the very beginning, they had never really planned to eat me. Although koi fish can be eaten, such an auspicious creature is usually not something people would actually eat. Even fishermen would let them go. But seeing the old man's actions, all the disciples were quite intelligent. And by putting two and two together, they vaguely formed a guess in their minds, which was why they had said that. And besides, the old man had put the koi fish into the basket. If it were an ordinary koi, they would have just played with it for a bit and then released it back into the river. But this one did not seem quite ordinary. The old man did not seem to mind, and just bring him up the mountain and raise him in the Tianqing pond. Really? The little girl's eyes lit up. "We are going to keep her." The old man nodded. "That is wonderful." The little girl and the boy jumped for joy. They were naturally happy about the koi fish, but the oldest young man beside them felt a sense of surprise in his heart. Tianqing Pond. That is a pond that comes from a legend. Even though it is a pond, no living creature had ever been kept in it. Legend has it in ancient times, the sky tilted toward the northwest for some reason, and the sun, moon, and stars all fell, plunging the northwest into darkness. Then this mountain began to tremble, as if awakened by a bell-like spirit, which is why this mountain is called Zhang Mountain. And it is said that the place where that bell spirit emerged was precisely this Tianqing Pond. Of course, that was a legend from very, very long ago, so no one really knows if it is true or not. Nowadays, Zhang Mountain naturally has sun, moon, and stars, and its terrain is vast, near a large river, with fertile soil, nurturing all the creatures of the land. But Tianqing Pond had always been a treasured place within the mountain gate. When the old man usually brought them to meditate and cultivate their nature, it was also by the Tianqing Pond, and he had never put any fish into it before. But this time, he was breaking that rule for a koi fish. Why was that? Clearly this koi fish was no ordinary creature. The young man scratched his head in confusion. "Master, what is the origin of this koi fish?" The old man looked at the young man, but did not answer directly. Instead, he said meaningfully, "All things in the world are under the influence of nature. Humans are the most intelligent of all creatures. But even we must follow the natural way. The sun and moon cycle, life and death return. This has never changed for eons. But he was born able to transcend this cycle." The young man still did not understand this point, but he did realize that the origin of this koi fish was likely extraordinary. But it was definitely not a demon. Still, if it were a demon, even if the master had discovered it, would he really bring it up the mountain and even raise it in the Tianqing Pond? Would that not defile such a sacred place? But since it is not a demon and has received such praise, could it be that it is an azure dragon? He then recalled that legend. The legend said that a dragon once lived in Tianqing Pond. The disciples and the old man slowly walked up the mountain. The sun was setting in the west, its afterglow spilling over the mountain, stretching the shadows very long, since becoming a reborn soul. This was not the first time I had been caught by humans. Whenever I was caught by humans, whether as an insect or as a fish, the outcome was usually more or less the same. There was nothing I could do about it. Although I could never truly die, the pain of death was still real and unavoidable. The only thing I could do was to stop thinking, and by the time I came to, I would probably be in my next life already. The agonizing time seemed to drag on, although I was not suffocating. Inside the basket, my senses of the outside world were also very weak. Instead, the faint sounds from the other fish beside me were greatly amplified at this moment. They were breathing rapidly out of instinct. I do not know how long passed. Suddenly the sky brightened. Then someone grabbed my body. Had the little girl finally arrived? I suddenly snapped out of it. It was the same little girl who had suggested eating raw fish. But surely she was not going to do it herself. Suddenly I found myself soaring into the air. But it was not the desperate thrashing of trying to escape. Instead, I had been tossed up into the air. The next moment, with a splash, I had fallen into the water. An overwhelming sense of relief and comfort spread through my entire body. It was the joy of a fish finally being back in water. You could call it the pleasure of fish and water together. I was not dead. Instead, I had been thrown into a pond. I immediately realized this. Of course, I did not think it was because of the little girl and her kind heart. Could it be that because they had caught so many fish today, I had been spared for a little while, becoming what you might call a living food reserve? Little junior sister, you are too rough. A voice faintly sounded from the edge of the pond. I looked up. and saw that those people were still by the pond, watching me. The one speaking was that honest-looking young girl. She seemed to be about 15 years old. That will hurt the fish. Can fish actually feel pain? Of course they can. If you do not believe me, ask Master. The old man stood to the side and explained in a deep voice, all living things experience both pain and joy. They just express it in different ways and with different attitudes. Besides, this is no ordinary fish. But I believe that your kindness toward him will still be felt. I had no strength left to complain. Just end it all already. I am tired. All right now, we should quickly go make dinner. After dinner, you all need to sit quietly and cultivate your minds, breathe, and refine your energy. I was drawn to that last phrase. I suddenly remembered that strange scene earlier with the willing bait taking the hook. But back then, I had been out of the water and was still in a dazed state, so I had not thought deeply about it. But now looking back, although I was not sure, could it be that they were the legendary immortal cultivators? Many thoughts ran through my mind. If I myself could be reborn again and again, then it would only make sense for immortals to exist too. That would be only natural. A glimmer of hope arose in my heart. If immortals existed, then there must be a chance for me too. Although right now I could only cycle through life after life. But if one day, I could actually grasp that fleeting opportunity and comprehend the immortal way, then perhaps I could change my destiny.